murder? We have one. Chapter 1. The Girl in the Blue Dress, written by Ryszard Haia. He awoke utterly exhausted, despite having spent over 8 hours in bed. His sleep had been restless. Sweaty and disoriented, he struggled to shake off the dream that had haunted him nearly every night. A girl in a sky-blue dress, dancing sensually in a forest clearing carpeted with wild flowers. Slender, long-haired, a brunette, maybe 20 years old. And he was more than twice her age, which disturbed him, because in waking life he never thought about girls with such youthful beauty. Was he in the throes of a midlife crisis? Midlife, as he saw it, had passed him by like an untreated cold. Now it felt more like the twilight crisis of old age, he told himself with self-pity, though he was far from feeble. It was his own private arithmetic of aging, dividing life into phases regardless of the world's conventions, especially now that society kept pushing those limits ever later in its desperate search for youth. People lived longer than they did a century ago. In Jane Austen's time, he'd long since have been written off. Why hasn't he died yet? They'd ask. He remembered his father at 60, embracing what seemed like a second or third youth. He got his driver's license, learned to use a computer and the internet, and began romancing actual grandmothers via social media. He'd rescue them from their grandchildren, whisk them to his apartment or stay at theirs, and make passionate love, so far as age and frail bodies allowed. No, his father had never been a model romantic, far from it. But he'd lived those final years more intensely than most people lived their youth. In rare moments of candor, his dad would chant his hard-won wisdom about women like a mantra. "I like 'em ripe, son," he'd say, "when there's something to hold on to." He died almost a decade later. Standing by his bedside as the old man lay unconscious, Kowalski felt little of the grief he might have if his father had spent his final days cloaked in lonely sorrow. On the funeral day, Kowalski even managed a slight smile as a hired, stammering priest mumbled prayers over the open grave. Pale petals rained down onto the coffin lid, tossed by an adoring throng of gray-haired ladies. It was a sunny day funeral that felt like a hymn to life. This man had truly lived. Those admirers kept bringing flowers to his father's grave. They missed that elderly Casanova who, perfumed and dapper in his little red Fiat, in a suit and tie with a bouquet in hand, would rush through rain or snow to reassure each of them of her allure. He'd fold back the seats, bundle them into the car, and within minutes they'd be giggling in an unmade bed to scratchy MP3s, 50-year-old hits, especially Joe Dassin, his father's favorite, and incidentally the son of a great film director. Et si tu n'existais pas? And if you did not exist? What a genuinely romantic song. But he was not his father. He'd felt old since his 18th birthday, perhaps since birth. Now, nearing retirement, he felt he was merely biding time until death. Maybe it was depression, or maybe he was simply disappointed. Unlike his father, he allowed himself to feel dissatisfied. He could only dream of a girl like the one in his visions. Yet he didn't. He wasn't a famous director or a fading rock star. He asked for no enhancements beyond his morning coffee and a stale pretzel. He was just an ordinary Kowalski, walking to work each day with his briefcase to punch the clock. Women his own age, weathered by life, rarely glanced at washed-up nobodies like him, much less girls young enough to be their daughters. In fact, he and his ex-wife had never tried for children, so that comparison didn't even hold. He was certain he had no unhealthy obsession with youth. Something else was at work here. but the subconscious seldom gave up its secrets. Egyptian dream books were useless to him every time he tried. Was it even a nightmare? Not for him. For that girl, perhaps, if she knew someone like him dreamt of her. Or worse, if he ever appeared in her own dreams. That would be the real horror. The dancing girl was a small work of art from the forge of his unconscious. She stirred no great longing, yet she was simply beautiful, like a modern dance piece at a cultural center. He appreciated culture, even if he didn't always grasp it. Still, he sensed the dream was saying more than he could decipher, and perhaps always would. The girl also reminded him of all those youthful, unfulfilled loves he'd once had. The wonderful girls, the parallel lives in which some version of himself might still exist beside one of them. Would they still carry that freshness, youth's glow and innocence? Had he kept any of it himself? Innocence? Doubtful. Naivete, perhaps. Certainly not orderliness. His sweat-soaked undershirt and sagging pajama bottoms clung to his body. He decided to do something about it and shuffled off to the bathroom. The mirror showed a sick man. Bags under bloodshot eyes, cheeks puffy, stubble shadowing his jaw. Wrinkled like the snouts of those little farting bulldogs now fashionable as walking companions for jaded city women. His thinning hair stuck out in all directions, as if strands in panic were abandoning a sinking ship, just as his wife had long ago. He liked to imagine it was a joint decision. Deep down, he knew she'd decided first. He'd only helped, through silence and inaction. Bachelor life isn't so bad in your 20s. Past 50, it becomes pitiful. The silence of an empty apartment grows unbearable. You start talking to yourself just to break it, just to endure it. And at night, no warm, velvet softness presses against you, only your own sour, saggy underwear. He showered, changed, and went to the corner store. He bought toilet paper and blood sausage, his birthday treat, a taste from childhood when money was tight and Kazanka counted as luxury. Not chocolate or cake, but pork pudding. Today's youth would never understand. Yet, ironically, it would be a luxury now, compared to the chemical-packed version he bought. The moment it hit the pan, it stank. When he tasted it, the memory of his father's cooking failed to return. Everyone gets the Madeleine they deserve. Proust's was refined. Kowalski's was more like a stale Chinese fortune cookie. Even that turned out empty, a bitter sign from the universe. Even his nostalgia had run dry, though he could probably reconstruct the periodic table from its chemical contents. He changed into his uniform, downed a mug of instant coffee, and headed to work.